Hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. I've got a question for you. Have you ever been part of a planning process, attending meetings sometimes on a weekly basis, only to find out that once everything was said and done, that the plan was challenged and reevaluated according to the interests of someone else who only marginally participated in the entire process? Well, that's what has happened in south central Utah, where a final resource management plan for the Richfield office of the BLM was recently challenged by special interest groups led by the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance and Earth Justice. Now, according to a press release on SUA's website, the challenges to the plan was an attempt to bring balanced management to public lands in Utah. There'd be some commissioners that I know in that part of the state who would disagree with that. Well, today we will talk to people who were involved in the planning process and who are currently working with the BLM on a resource management plan in Iron County. We invited the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance to participate in this discussion, but they chose politely to decline. We also invited the BLM to participate, and they said they would be happy to join us in a future conversation, but they can't right now because of the current litigation. So let's first look at the Richfield Resource Management Plan and what went into the process.
It was a process that began in 2002. Over the next 6 years, millions of dollars in tax funds would be spent on a resource management plan affecting 2.1 million acres of public lands overseen by the Bureau of Land Management. The Resource Management Plan is basically a guideline for how best to use and protect resources found on public lands and is meant to provide guidance for land use planning for the next 10 to 20 years. Now, a recent decision by Judge Kimball from the United States District Court has raised questions on over 4,000 miles of motorized routes contained in the 2008 Richfield Travel Management Plan. This announcement has wilderness advocates celebrating, but has left the stakeholders who were heavily involved in the resource and travel management plans questioning the entire process.
During the last period of that time, I was the chairman of the Resource Advisory Council for the BLM, so I was heavily involved in all of those plans. And to go through that process and then have it set aside, it sort of makes you feel like, well, what was the worth of that?
The good faith efforts that were put forth and the compromises that were made on all sides, and then to see those things not put in place, to see it just drag out and not go anywhere, it's frustrating for me, and I know it's frustrating for people.
Judge Kimball ruled that the BLM didn't follow their own regulations, requiring that minimization of impacts from off-highway vehicle use be taken into account when they limited travel to designated routes. However, the 2008 plan did close most of the planning area to open riding, where in the past, vehicles had unrestricted access to go anywhere.
You didn't have to stay on a trail. And so as we looked at that, we all felt like that probably wasn't a good idea. In our resource management plan area out of Richfield, there's 3 or 4 small areas where you can ride wherever you want. They're called open areas. But all of the rest of the trails, everything else was confined to existing trails and roads. In fact, a lot of those were closed in this plan.
One of the frustrations from people involved in the planning is that it's being characterized as a hasty decision made during the closing hours of the Bush administration. Cornell Christensen, the Richfield office field manager for BLM during the planning process, vehemently disagrees.
What they want you to believe is not true. It didn't just happen overnight. It took a good 8 years plus to develop that plan and get it signed. And we had thousands of comments that we answered, and we made changes to the plan based on those comments.
There's also the worry statewide that this challenge to the Richfield RMP is only the proverbial tip of the iceberg if the decision isn't appealed by BLM.
If they don't appeal it, that affects every plan in the state of Utah and every BLM plan in the nation. And I looked at it the other day, and it could affect the travel plans on the Forest Service lands too.
The court is currently reviewing potential remedies provided by the various parties involved in the suit, but by all accounts, there is likely a long road ahead in the Resource Management Plan controversy. For the county seat, I'm Don Dunwell.
When we come back, we will talk to representatives from the counties about the impacts this will likely have on their economy and future land planning. Stay with us.
The best part about raising children here in Vernal and the Uinta Basin is just the smaller community that makes you feel like when you go somewhere, you know everybody.
So we packed up our 3 kids and here we came to Uinta County. And what a great place it was. What a great move. Great schools, great outdoor activities. Just a really great place to raise your family.
My father, he was an engineer for Chevron, retired 39 some odd years. And Jeff, my husband, it's the same way. He's always worked in the oil and gas, always had a job here. And with that industry, when it does good, the whole valley thrives.
Uinta Basin's been fantastic in supporting what we've tried to do both as a business and also in the development of mountain bike trails and the sport of mountain biking.
I'm able to run up to a beautiful place like this and spend some good quality time. It's one of the big reasons why I live where I live.
And that makes it just a wonderful place to have little ones like this.
I didn't order this.
Compliments of the lady in gold.
Hello, trouble.
Anything worth doing in this quiet little town?
You look like the kind of man that could show a girl a good time.
You strike me as the kind of girl that likes a manicure and a massage.
How's that for a manicure?
I hate golf.
I was hoping for something a little more vigorous.
Vigorous, I can do.
And I thought you'd be riding side saddle.
What? I'm gonna regret this. How about that manicure?
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about the Richfield RMP today. Joining us for conversation, Mark Ward from the Utah Association of Counties, Mike Worthen, who is from Iron County, and I might add a county who's in the process of doing an RMP right now, and Commissioner Darin Bushman from Piute County. Somehow the general public perception is that all of these RMPs that they did were rushed through, that it was a midnight hour of desperation at the end of the Bush administration, and they just like put them all together in 4 months. How do you respond to that?
Well, they certainly weren't rushed through. There was tons and tons of effort put into them. A lot of stakeholders came together to put these things together. And you know, we felt like we gave up a lot. I mean, in the Richfield plan, we went from overland travel to restricted routes. I mean, there was a big change in the overall, you know, what we were used to what we were going to. So there was a dramatic difference, and that planning process was lengthy.
What are the options? What do we do? Because somehow we have a mitigation that has to take place until we figure out what we're doing and we get everything restudied. What's it going to look like?
Well, on its face, the plan or the ruling, and of course this ruling actually is subject to appeal, but on its face, the ruling requires a very, very expensive undertaking for several thousand miles of roads in the Richfield RMP. There has to be a careful archaeological inventory done, and also a careful analysis to make sure that they have minimized the route impacts from each road. Now, that has to be, according to Judge Kimball, a mile by mile effort. And when you take that effort and you times it out by the several thousands miles of roads, this very soon will become a very expensive, almost prohibitively expensive undertaking.
4,300 miles worth of study that has to be done.
Wasn't any of it done before, or just not to the satisfaction of the judge or the plaintiffs?
It was done, but not in this specific way that the judge is calling for. Ironically, as Darin mentioned, the way it used to be was there was overland travel, but then they said let's bring all the travel and keep it on existing routes, which then reduces the impact overall. You think that would be a net gain, but for some reason the judge was persuaded in thinking that, well, wait a minute, if you concentrate all the travel on the roads, that's going to create more impacts on the roads. And so you need a really heightened scrutiny. It really turns the reasoning on its head because it's all an effort to reduce the impact overall. If you take cross-country travel and all of a sudden you make it stick to roads, that's not more impacts, that's less impacts.
One thing that plays in here too that I don't think a lot of people realize is that last year there was a decision handed down on the Badlands in the Missouri breaks where there was 400 roads in question, and the plaintiffs brought up the same issue, that it was not scrutinized correctly. The BLM chose not to challenge that, and so this judge used that part of his decision. That's what prompted him to add this. You didn't challenge it in that, and so you thought it was all right. Now we're bringing it in this court, and you're going to have to do it like you did in Missouri.
The interesting thing about it, we're not talking about new roads, Chad. We're talking about taking people from overland travel and putting them on existing roads that have been there for hundreds of years. You know what I mean? Instead of driving wherever you want to, we're basically putting people on routes that have existed forever.
There are like fifth-generation people out of some of these lands, these rural lands that rely on these roads. If they close them off while they try and figure it out, how much impact is that going to have really on a lifestyle or even people's livelihoods?
It'll turn everything upside down. It'd be totally devastating.
And I'm not sure if the plaintiffs are demanding that they close the road, shut everything down until it's figured out, or whether the BLM says, okay, we'll go back to our existing plan, our previous land use plan, which everything is open until we figure it out. I don't think we really know that until.
That's an interesting question, because if you say, okay, the 2008 RMP travel plan is invalid, well, you have to revert back to something. If you take that off the books, then you have to go back to what was there before that was on the books, and that was cross-country travel. So there's some real irony in what's happening here. In some ways, the judge could be reopening cross-country travel.
You know, the mitigation is the real issue, right? Well, how do we mitigate it? If we mitigate it by shutting off all travel, all OHV travel, the ramifications are huge. I mean, we destroy central Utah essentially economically. So the real question is, how do we mitigate it? Well, if we mitigate it by going back to the previous plan, I'm quite confident the plaintiffs are not interested in going back to the previous plan, because that opens up cross-country travel. So this is where the real key is going to come out. You know, what is the mitigation?
What's the scope of the potential damage of this to the rural communities of Utah?
It's immense. We're under siege, in essence, in a variety of fronts.
It's broad and deep, and the solution has to be broad and deep back. The current system allows too much for things to be dragged to a screeching halt through litigation. There needs to be some kind of substantial overhaul, whether it's a congressional fix or what, I'm not sure. But you know, a lot of the very fundamental core values of public lands, grazing, access, energy, are really all at stake right now.
We went from multiple use, sustained yield, and local management to conservation by litigation. That's where we're at.
Okay, well, that's a great place to take a break. We are going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the perspective of past RMPs and the perspective of the county that's engaged in developing an RMP, and we'll be back with the county seat in just a minute.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
Get ready, set, jump. The day starts off at sunrise with the Cisco Disco. Come catch Cisco fish at Cisco Beach on the east side of Bear Lake. After the fishing, why not jump in the lake yourself? The Bear Lake Monster Polar Plunge starts at 11 a.m. at the Bear Lake State Park Arena. All proceeds from the event go to Primary Children's Medical Center. Gather your family and head north for a great cause. Visit bearlake.org for more information. Rich County, take the plunge.
Almost 45% of the oil produced in Utah, 7.8 million barrels, comes from Duchesne County. That oil feeds our state economy, provides job growth, and supports local business. Here in Duchesne County, we're working to make Utah an economic, cultural, and technological leader. Whether you're here for business or pleasure, Duchesne County will welcome you with open arms and invite you to explore all the beauty of the Uinta Mountains. Duchesne County, close enough for business, far enough to get away.
Rediscover your sense of adventure by attending the 16th Annual Bluff International Balloon Festival, January 17th through the 19th in Bluff, Utah. Visit us for some of the most beautiful, unencumbered red rock flying in the Southwest. Utah's San Juan County, where life is elevated.
Welcome back to the county seat. We're having a discussion today about the Richfield RMP and a Judge Kimball decision that has forced them to go back and look at the entire transportation system and how they developed it and how resources are impacted. I want to ask this question, and Mike, I'm very glad you're here with us today, because Iron County is in a very different spot than any other county in the entire state, and the fact that you are currently developing an RMP, and that when all of these others were done so that they all got on the same page at the same time, you guys got a pass on that, so to speak, and you're just developing it. So as a person who's really involved in this, does this kind of action like spook you a little bit about the process that you're putting all this effort into right now?
Well, one thing that you have to realize is that in 2012, May of 2012, the Interior Department issued an informational memorandum, or a change of policy basically on this issue. And instead of requiring field analysis that was required in the manual, they have come out and said, rather than that, we will do a coordination with the state Historic Preservation Office and the tribe's Historic Preservation Office, and identify the issues on those roads in question and come up with some type of solution that is involved with the public input, and so they don't really have to do the detailed analysis called for in the previous manual.
So basically, does this look to you like the BLM realized that this was a bad deal and they changed their policy?
Oh, I think so. I think the change of policy is in direct relation to the Badlands decision and what was coming down the pike on the Richfield decision.
Okay.
So I think the rest of the counties will be watching very carefully what happens in Iron County with the Cedar City BLM field office. Because if they can make it work under this new guidance, then that possibly could serve as a remedy for going back and readjusting the 2008 plans. We'll just have to see. You've got that going on in Iron County. You've got the fact that the judge wants to be briefed currently on what the remedy is. There are a lot of different swirling processes and moving parts. We'll just have to see how it plays out.
In Iron County, it's unique in that we have the ability, or the BLM in the Cedar City field office has the ability to look at what's happening and adjust their planning accordingly, where Richfield doesn't have that opportunity.
They changed their policy in 2012. Why couldn't they just say, the BLM say, well, we're going to make this retroactive? Why wouldn't that diffuse the legal challenge?
That's a possibility. That's a possible solution here. All the judge could do was pass on what was before him, which was the 2008 RMP. It was cast in stone. It was done deal. All he could do was rule on that. I think inventive minds and reasonable minds could come together and say, hey, why can't we operate under the new policy? It would take some give and take. but you know, it would save a lot of time and money and hassle and litigation.
How would that work, though, going forward on the Richfield plan? Somebody would still have to make some decisions and recommendations. Would that still require as much field work?
Well, I think it doesn't require the complexity of field work that the judge is asking for out of this ruling, and that simplifies it greatly. So it simplifies the timeline, which is a big concern, and also simplifies the dollar investment that we're talking about.
Exactly.
So
well, I guess the other question is, there'd be the other side that looks at this situation and go, okay, so if we do that, are the resources going to be as adequately protected?
Well, you know, I have a feeling about this that no matter what we do, the rules and the set of rules that these agencies work under are so complex and so involved that there's always litigatory chinks in the armor, and they will always litigate these issues. That's my belief, and I believe that we're in a situation that's so complex with the rules that they've set. I don't know how we get out of it without a much bigger solution.
All right, well, you're watching The County Seat. We'll be back with our conversation on the Richfield RMP in just a minute.
Skiing is expensive, right? Well, how about we do something about that? Eagle Point, Southern Utah's premier resort located right outside of Beaver, Utah, is proud to announce $25 lift tickets all season long. Ski and snowboard Utah's newest resort for the lowest price, and find out why the Point, with its family-friendly staff and great atmosphere, will become your second home. $25 lift passes all season. Go to eaglepointresort.com for eligibility and restrictions. 5 lifts, 40 named runs, 1,500 vertical feet. Endless possibilities. Eagle Point Resort.
The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, SITLA, manages 3.5 million acres of Utah lands with the express purpose of providing financial support to further the education of Utah's students, while promoting local industry, oil and gas, even residential development, all at the same time. Through the careful use of trust lands, the School Land Trust Program will distribute nearly $37 million to Utah schools this year. The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, building the state's permanent school fund.
How would you spend an extra day in Utah Valley? Stay one more day. Visit utahvalley.com to make reservations. Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
You go through the day-to-day repeating what you did yesterday. Don't you wish you could access that piece of your life that's missing? Find the beauty, serenity, family fun, or anything else that's missing from your life in the Cedar City, Bryan Head area. Gain access to your adventure, whether it's camping, hiking, the arts, festivals, or just a getaway. Visit ScenicSouthernUtah.com for details on all the adventures that you can access in scenic Southern Utah.
Welcome back to the County Seat. We are having a conversation today about the Richfield RMP. So far, we've looked at what happened, the implications it had, how it may look different for counties who are involved in it. Now, let's just go to the broader issue. And when we took the break, we were at a point where we were talking about the fact that it's too complex, and that there are so many different twists and turns that it's subject to litigation. So my question is, do we need to revamp the entire process, which immediately brings to light the Rob Bishop plan? Is that a solution?
It's one possible solution. There are other solutions. The Utah legislature has approached the matter through House Bill 148, a transfer of public lands. That's another solution. There are some broad solutions out there that Utah is very seriously considering.
Is there, the Bishop plan probably needs to be explained a little bit, because there are concerns that it's just a sellout to environmental groups and doesn't really look at the broader picture, that it may be too narrow. How will that process pan out?
Well, my perspective on it is, I think we're giving away land that is already promised to the state of Utah in our Enabling Act, and so I'm not a big fan. I believe that the Transfer of Public Lands Act, which the state legislature has approved and give the walking orders to our representatives, is a better solution. It eliminates a lot of these frivolous lawsuits that are coming through equal access to justice and various other things. You know, as far as the Bishop plan goes, if you're an energy producing county, it's a win-win for you, because you're basically trading wilderness in a donor county for productive land in your county. So if you're Uinta County, you're probably a big fan of this. If you're Wayne or Piute, where you're going to give up a bunch of wilderness and possibly get a check on the short term, you know, I just think we're selling out our children's posterity, you know, their future with giving up more wilderness in exchange for these lands. So,
could the Bishop plan actually go forward and you know, be damaging to the counties, and you know, all of a sudden you've got this thing that's taken off in Washington, and the counties are back here going, no, we don't like the trade. How would that work?
Congressman Bishop has promised each county who is playing in this process that he will not go forward with a bill that is not to their liking. He's invited each of them to lay out what they would like out of the bill as far as pro-development features for each county in exchange for wilderness designation. Congressman Bishop, of course, is the chair of the subcommittee right now, and if the Republicans hold the House in 2014, he stands a very good chance of becoming the chairman of the full Committee on Natural Resources, a very powerful position. The idea of legislation getting away from us under Bishop's watch is, it's not something that I worry about personally, and I think he would keep a check on it so that if it doesn't go through the way we want, then it won't go through at all. And he's given us that promise, and I think there's good reason to rely on that.
I think one of the big concerns with Congressman Bishop's plan, as I've talked to other counties that are involved or interested, is the longevity or the stay of execution, if you will. If you give up X amount of wilderness, you know, does that mean that you're good at this point, or does it mean that you're still open to special interest groups and special interests trying to designate more and more wilderness? Are we still at the mercy of the Antiquities Act to designate national monuments and so on and so forth? And that's something that the congressman has even openly said, I can't prevent what will happen in a future Congress. You know, he's said that, and I think that's a concern from a lot of counties.
Very quickly, what would be your favorite solution? You're in the process.
Well, in our county, there's kind of two ways of thinking. One is, yeah, take the check and help the county out, the citizens, with that check, but then giving the store away for your children, and you don't have that resource out there. So it's kind of a mixed bag in our county. We've got some commissioners that are semi for it and some that are totally opposed to it.
Remember, local government is where your life happens, so make sure that you are up to speed on how that process works, because as time goes on, it's very obvious it will become more and more important in your daily life. Thanks for watching. Thanks for inviting us into your home. Tell your friends about it. Make your comments on Facebook. Get more information on our website. We'll see you next week on the County Seat.